inconceivable situation. Despite the many problems she faced in her personal life, she tackled each official engagement with grace and aplomb. Wherever she went, she seemed to light up the lives of those around her.
Who's that?
I thought you might ask that one.
Who's that? Who does she belong to? Yours.
She would bring even to the most formal occasions a sense of informality and fun. Everyone who met her spoke of that magic touch and her ability to affect the lives of ordinary people.
And then onto the parade ground. That takes about a minute.
How many times do you practice this? Yeah, I'll fit a thing on it.
I think that's very good.
I think that's all right.
Yes, I think it's absolutely good.
You can't really say much else, can you? It's lovely, thank you very much. I'm proud.
By 1984, Diana was pregnant again, and the royal couple enjoyed the happiest period of their married life. A short while later, on September the 15th, at St. Mary's Hospital in London, Prince Harry was born. But what should have been a joyous occasion for both Charles and Diana quickly turned sour.
After Prince Harry was born, she said to her friends, he looked at Harry, he expected to have a girl, he wanted a girl, and he said, oh, it's a boy and it's got red hair. Red hair is a Spencer characteristic. So she says herself that something inside died on that day, on the day that Harry was born, and from that moment onwards, her staff, her friends, and all those around her could feel the chill surrounding Charles and Diana.
Diana was concerned that the sorry state of her marriage should not affect the lives of her sons. Memories of her own unhappy childhood reinforced her determination to become the best mother in the world. With typical tenacity, she made the young princes the center of her life.
Mine, can I lead him, please?
Will you promise to walk slowly?
That's much better. Nice and slowly. That's better for Harry. Good boy.
Her life was her son's. They meant really everything to her, and she had a very close relationship with them both. She really has guided them through so much and prepared William certainly for the role ahead of him. And I think he will miss her more than words can possibly say. She wanted them to be in touch. That for her was the most important thing, not to be isolated. I think the monarchy has been very isolated, and she lent it a very human side with all the work that she did. And she was always keen to impress on Prince William and Prince Harry how important that was to stay in touch. I think that would be the single message that both of them will remember from her, that and her extraordinary compassion for other people.
The royal couple were living a lie. Their marriage was on the rocks, but the royal roadshow had to go on. Once more, Australia. the marriage of the century of which dreams are made had become a tyranny of togetherness.
Good luck.
Thanks, I'm gonna need it.
He's in closer to the fence now, the length and a half, then Feeder are and Under Rosen there, followed by Black Knight. 300 to go, our boyfriend under the whip, a length and a half in front of Butternut and Coiro Corrie.
Only the closest insiders could have detected the fragile state of Diana and Charles's marriage.
Coiro Corrie May's got ahead in front of Butternut. What a nuisance coming at Coiro Corrie May. What a nuisance going home, the better they hit the line.
But for the royal couple, it was not all fun at the races. Overseas tours were long and arduous and made more difficult by a strained relationship and schedules that didn't always go according to plan.
Change your berth, didn't it? Well, there's a problem with the runway at Palm Beach. Not possible.
What do you mean later?
No,
later
later.
what?
That we may have to drive to Miami and take off from there. So
Which is a mere 5 hours drive, wasn't
no,
it?
it's not.
6.
45 minutes. About 45 minutes.
So that we'll get back to Bristol by
I
midnight.
think it might just tip us over to midnight.
That's all right, because it's 6 o'clock our time, isn't it? Body time.
Oh, that's a
all
good
right.
way of looking at it.
Still be drinks time for you.
Anyway, I'm working on it.
Yes, right.
So no press, just official photographers for official
Hello, my little time.
10 to 8, 10 to 8. Yes.
Their first visit to the United States followed, where a curious press corps mustered in force to report on a presidential welcome for the royal couple. For Diana, it was a widening of her horizons, a portent of things to come. In later years, it was America that responded most enthusiastically to the charismatic English princess with the film star looks.
She's so thin, it's disgusting. She's beautiful. She's great. She's beautiful. She's great.
Back in England, Diana extended her patronage to an ever-widening circle of groups and causes. She passionately wanted to do good and possessed an instinct for human relations, the true touch of a princess, which was unequalled.
Because the gala was wonderful. I adored that.
You enjoyed it, didn't
I had a comb, much to Harold's horror. Every time there was a quiet moment, it was going on. I loved it.
You didn't look it. It doesn't show in your eyes when you have it.
Well,
I
that's
mean,
just good
yeah.
makeup.
No, but some people's eyes go dull.
You must have felt rotten though, having to sit through it
No, it's
all.
all right now. I just get embarrassed. And you know when you're not supposed to cough, you cough more.
Of course, you can't control it.
And the bachelor's dress, of course.
Yes. Didn't think I had the pearls down the back that night.
No,
No, you didn't. No.
I learnt that. I was very uncomfortable when I wore that.
When you
Stabbed in the back.
swing past and then
Although Charles and Diana now only came together on official occasions, they still maintained the facade of a rock-solid marriage. This was the young Prince Harry's first day at school. Divorce seemed out of the question, as it would mean the destruction of everything the royal family stood for. Meanwhile, they both looked elsewhere for the affection and support that they had failed to give each other. For Charles, it meant a return to Camilla Parker Bowles, the love of his life.
I think there were a few years while the children were being born when he kept her at a distance, but the friendship remained, and the friendship always had the capacity to become sexual again, which I think it did long before the marriage had irretrievably broken down. The marriage broke down because of his relationship with Mrs. Parker Bowles. And if Diana had 2 or 3 lovers after the irretrievable breakdown of the marriage, so what? Psychologically, I think men and women will understand that Diana, the world's most famous, the world's most attractive woman, deserved to fall into 1 or 2 subsequent arms to have the happy family life she's always wanted and always been denied.
In February 1992, evidence of the strange in their marriage became public when Diana spurned Charles's attempt to kiss her at the end of the polo match. A 6-day official tour of India became a tale of 2 tours, with Charles and Diana going their separate ways.
Prince Charles went to the Taj Mahal some 10 years before the visit towards the end of the marriage. It is one of the world's most romantic places. When they did go to India together, he didn't take her. He chose to stay behind in Delhi.
A wiser prince than I would have opted for a visit to the Taj Mahal and the Red Fort at Agra, which I believe is where some, at least, of the greatest pundits of the press think I ought to be anyway.
She famously now posed for a photograph alone, therefore looking very solitary, and it became the main one of what were called a series of postcards home, another one at the pyramids in Egypt, where she was sending clever signals to the world that she was very alone in this marriage.
It was this bombshell book that finally blew the lid off the royal marriage. In June 1992, Andrew Morton's Diana, Her True Story was published with the princess's tacit consent. It claimed that she was trapped in a loveless marriage and was desperately unhappy. Despite the book's claims that Charles was a distant father, uncaring husband, and adulterer, the couple embarked on a disastrous state visit to Korea a few months after publication. Diana denied any involvement with the book, and no statements were forthcoming from Buckingham Palace.
In the absence of any official statements or other information or interviews, body language becomes immensely important. And it was the body language of that trip, the Korea trip, that showed that this marriage had broken down. And Diana's antennae, I think, were much more alert to this body language. Again, you can call it media manipulation if you want to, but awareness of the media than Charles, who just gritted his teeth and got through it.
Diana returned from the Korean fiasco alone, and speculation was rife. The British public, who'd expected so much of Charles and Diana in 1981, were left confused and perplexed. A further bombshell awaited them.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that, with regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate. Their Royal Highnesses have no plans to divorce, and their constitutional positions are unaffected. This decision has been reached amicably, and they will both continue to participate fully in the upbringing of their children, while continuing to give a wholehearted commitment to their public duties.
Your patron has never been happier to see you. Whatever uncertainties the last few weeks may have brought, I want you to be certain of this: our work together will continue unchanged, especially now as Christmas brings its own painful stresses to so many people in need. The sick, the old, the handicapped and the homeless, the lonely, the confused, and the simply unloved, who are needing your help more than ever.
A new era opened in Diana's life. She now threw herself, body and soul, into charity work, using her personal magnetism to draw support for some of the most difficult causes.
When you look through Diana's life, you see that she's always been slightly rebellious. Her work for AIDS was very much against the royal rules. I mean, they tend to stick to very traditional charities, and the very fact that she was prepared to cuddle AIDS victims, shake their hands without gloves, helped to break down much of the mythology surrounding AIDS. And in that respect, I think she did an enormous amount, not just in Britain, but around the world, to help to break down those taboos.
She had the common touch. It's no secret that we used to go to a hospice and people would stay alive knowing she was going to come, and they wanted to see her so much they would carry on living. because this woman just had the touch. She would sit on the beds of the patients and hold their hands. I remember in Brazil once, you know, she cuddled these AIDS babies when AIDS was a real dirty word, you know, but Diana almost single-handedly took the stigma out of AIDS.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it.
She had a complicated personality. Who doesn't? But just this, you know, this underlying enormous compassion and capacity to give and to respond to people who were suffering on exactly their level. She understood about suffering. She'd suffered so much herself that she was able to, it was really a language, an emotional language that she understood.
She became aware not just of her ability to be the fairy on the Christmas tree, but to be a woman who could bring attention to subjects that were neglected. And not only subjects that were neglected, but subjects in which she herself got a real buzz out of being involved. She started with the glitz and then went to the things that were far less glamorous, which gave her more satisfaction.
I think we ought to retire gracefully.
Armed with nothing more potent than a smile and a kindly word, she reached out to others with her personal gospel of giving and caring.
When she had returned from various engagements, often she would cry. She was completely depleted by what she had done. And I think very often what the public saw was this extraordinary woman going about her job. And I think very often they thought it was easy, but it was not easy for her. It absolutely drained her. She had an extraordinary life force. She was a very magnetic person, and she harnessed that to good use.
Two things stand like stone: kindness in another's trouble, courage in your own.
At home, Diana brought one of her own long-standing problems to center stage, her battle with bulimia.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have it on very good authority that the quest for perfection our society demands can leave the individual gasping for breath at every turn. This pressure inevitably extends into the way we look. Eating disorders, whether it be anorexia or bulimia, show how an individual can turn the nourishment of the body into a painful attack on themselves.
Diana's body and face were her power, but her curse too. She had become a fashion icon and the most photographed woman in the world. But the constant scrutiny of her clothes and appearance made her a prisoner of her own celebrity. She developed a love-hate relationship with the press. It became an ever-present and increasingly complicated part of her life. She became astute at manipulating the media to make a point. On the day that Charles confessed to having an affair with Camilla Parker Bowles, she stole the headlines by wearing that now famous revealing black dress.
I think she understood the newspaper photographers that were there covering her as an assignment. She used to get pretty upset with some of the paparazzi who were there just to make her get angry, see her not looking at her best, to get as much money for their photographs as they could. And for them, she ended up despising them.
The press pried into her private life to an alarming degree. There were so-called secretly recorded tapes everywhere. First, Diana Gate, allegedly a conversation between Diana and a male companion. Then Camilla Gate, allegedly between Charles and his lover. Then the Highgrove tapes, supposedly of arguments between the prince and the princess at their country home. The final straw came when a newspaper published pictures of the princess working out in a gym. It led Diana to speak out about the intolerable pressure she was living under.
When I started my public life 12 years ago, I understood the media might be interested in what I did. I realized then their attention would inevitably focus on both our private and public lives. But I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become, nor the extent to which it would affect both my public duties and my personal life in a manner that's been hard to bear. My first priority will continue to be our children, William and Harry, who deserve as much love and care and attention as I am able to give, as well as an appreciation of the tradition into which they were born.
Diana lavished love and affection on William and Harry and was determined that they should live as normal a life as possible. Her happiest days were with her boys. The divorce from Charles became official in August 1996.
I think the big mistake was removing her title at the divorce. Not that she minded about that sort of thing. She never stood on ceremony. That wasn't her way at all, as anybody who's worked with her and seen her going about her work would vouch for. But I don't think what she didn't anticipate is that when it was removed, there was a barrier. It was an invisible barrier that protected her. And then when that was removed, she was suddenly very vulnerable.
But even though Diana was no longer a royal highness, the press continued to track her every move. There was no escape. After her divorce, Diana made a symbolic break with the past. She sold 79 of her designer dresses at a charity auction in New York. It was typical of the Queen of Hearts that she chose to make a new start by raising money for people less fortunate than herself. The auction raised a staggering £2 million. The new Diana was not afraid to involve herself with political issues. Her heartfelt but controversial campaign to outlaw landmines gave her a new sense of purpose and fulfillment.
Charlie, who's behind you, is going to come in here, place the charge next to the mine.
Hello.
But the search for personal peace was harder to achieve. She needed the press to publicize her causes.
1, 2, 3, firing.
But that media attention came at a price.
Hey.
It made her very angry when she was trying to relax. And when all she wanted was time out, time to discuss, girl talk, basically. That's it. That's all she wanted, a bit of peace. And she was never, ever, ever allowed it.
In the final months of Diana's life, media attention reached epic proportions. There were rumors of a new romance, and the bounty hunters were out in force. The man in Diana's life was Playboy millionaire Dodi Al-Fayed. It seemed Diana might at last have found the true happiness that had eluded her for so long. But it was not to be. On August 31st, 1997, Diana and Dodi perished in the mangled wreckage of their car in a Paris underpass.
Le SAMU de Paris qui a effectué la réanimation initiale. À son arrivée à l'hôpital de la Pitié-Salpêtrière, elle présente...
When she arrived at the hospital, she was already suffering hemorrhaging in the thorax. Then she suffered a stroke. Her death was recorded at 4 o'clock in the morning.
The Prince of Wales flew to Paris to bring Diana's body home.
You know how difficult things were for her from time to time. I'm sure we can only guess at, but the people everywhere, not just here in Britain, everywhere, they kept faith with Princess Diana. They liked her, they loved her. They regarded her as one of the people. She was the people's princess. And that's how she will stay, how she will remain in our hearts and in our memories forever.
Trouble.
Charles.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
William.
William.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hold on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Since last Sunday's dreadful news, we have seen throughout Britain and around the world an overwhelming expression of sadness at Diana's death. We have all been trying in our different ways to cope. It is not easy to express a sense of loss, since the initial shock is often succeeded by a mixture of other feelings: disbelief, incomprehension, anger, and concern for those who remain. This is also an opportunity for me, on behalf of my family, and especially Prince Charles and William and Harry, to thank all of you who have brought flowers, sent messages, and paid your respects in so many ways to a remarkable person. I hope that tomorrow we can all, wherever we are, join in expressing our grief at Diana's loss and gratitude for her all too short life. It is a chance to show to the whole world the British nation united in grief and respect. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her two boys.